So welcome everybody. Our today's session in the format of the Global Tourism Recovery Forum is going to be dedicated to the meetings industry. And we are going to look at our industry through the eyes of our industry associations. We have a fantastic group of people joining us today to share their insights. We will check in with the American Society of Association Executives first, starting here in North America. Then for the more broader global perspective, we will check with ICCA, International Congress and Convention Associations, as well as SITE, the Society for Travel Excellence. We also will check with the two associations that represent the voice of the supplier partners for our industry. We'll talk to the American Hotel and Lodging Association, as well as AIPC, International Association for Convention Centers. But to start us off, I'm going to ask Susan, welcome, to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization that you represent today.
Thank you, Larissa. Hi, my name is Susan Robertson, and I'm the president and CEO of ASAE, which is the American Society of Association Executives. We're located in Washington, D.C., but we have members all around the world. We have about 48,000 members who are association professionals. They're responsible for leading and working for associations. And our value proposition is to provide education and community and advocacy for our members and on behalf of the association community.
Fantastic. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for being here with us today. I was wondering if we could start by maybe reminding ourselves and our audience a little bit about how important associations are and the role of associations playing in the fabric of our societies globally. So what is behind the power of A?
I love the opportunity to tell that story. It's the power of associations. Associations do amazing work. They're mission-driven organizations, whether they represent a trade or a profession. All associations really exist to add value to society. We add value around the world, in fact, make it safer and stronger and better through the work that we do. Associations, when you put them all together and you think about the members that they represent, are a very powerful voice here in the United States in terms of Capitol Hill and making inroads there, especially there, but also in safety, in technology and education, almost everything that affects our society. I like to say that associations touch individuals in ways every day, from the standards that are set that help us navigate our homes and our environment safely, to the food safety that we have. If you think about it, associations touch all of that. So the work is incredibly important. And the role that ASAE plays is to make sure that associations are strong and vibrant and sustainable going forward so that that work can continue.
Thank you, Susan. We all would agree that because association plays such an important role in our societies, so the well-being and the health of those organizations is critical. And yes, we all know how difficult the time is right now. So can you share with us about what are some of the most challenging issues that societies and associations have to face right now, and how maybe these challenges are helping us to transform?
Well, that's a wonderful question because it's really a two-part one. Associations have been hit hard by this crisis. Not every association. There are some that are representing those who are on the front line of this pandemic, and they're adding value and they're being relevant in real time every single day. And their members are growing and there's a lot of vitality. For others who have lost the ability to have face-to-face meetings, conferences, we are hit hard. We've done some survey work, and there are associations who literally have 70% of their annual revenue that can be driven by one major conference. If they're not able to have that conference face to face, it's a real disaster. And there are many such stories in our community now. And I don't think anybody expected this pandemic to last as long as it has. But since it has, we're really waiting in line now for, especially in the US, for relief from the federal government by including 501c6 organizations in the Paycheck Protection Program, which will be the next COVID relief package. Just like small businesses, associations need help from the government in order to sustain themselves. We're all really dependent and have been in this past year on the insurability of our events. And going forward, event cancellation insurance is harder to come by, it's more expensive. And the kind of relief that small businesses could enjoy with the first round of relief have not been part of the 501c6 relief, which includes DMOs. So it's an important thing to be in favor of. So, associations have really had to change in some really important ways because the lack of face-to-face, which is our mainstay, our bread and butter, are just not possible for us now.
Susan, if we bring it back inside ASAE, as a membership, as a global organization, membership organization, have you had to take a pause maybe at some point early this year and take a close look at what your priorities, what your goals are? How do you bring more value or continue to be relevant and important in helping your members? Could you share this with us?
Absolutely. We've had to, I wouldn't say we've taken a pause. I'd say we've actually accelerated because of the needs of our members being so immediate, the need for associations in general and ASAE in particular to be more relevant than ever is right upon us. And we had to turn on a dime. The minute that we realized that face-to-face meetings were not safe to hold and not possible, our whole business model needed to shift. And like many other associations, we shifted to virtual platforms in order to convene our members, to help us to learn from each other. Quite frankly, for any association, there's just no playbook. There's no prescribed way to deal with a pandemic like this. We didn't expect it, and now we're in the midst of it, trying to figure out how we're going to get on the other side and still be viable and sustainable. So ASAE, like many other organizations, had to figure out what are the immediate needs our members have right now, what is our role in responding to that, and then just do it. I think there are a lot of valuable lessons that will come out of this that I think will stay with us for the remainder or for after COVID. But I think one of the key things is that immediacy and that relevancy can't go away from our value propositions going forward. It's not to say that associations were sleepy or complacent, but I think this pandemic has exacerbated or accelerated some of the changes that we needed to make, that we knew we needed to make, but maybe hadn't until it became a crisis. Now that we've done that, we're leaner. In some cases, we're way faster and more relevant. And those are the good things that need to come forward with us when we get out of this crisis and continue as part of our business models.
Well, I have to ask, I will be asking that question, everybody. If you had a crystal ball, where do you see personally, when is the industry coming back, let's say association meetings, or when are we going to be able to see each other again at conferences? When can we come to ASAE Annual that we love so much?
Oh my gosh. Boy, I wish I did have a crystal ball, but I don't, and no one does. And I think that's the point. This vaccine, we're having this conversation right on the heels of the promising announcement that vaccines are ready. The rollout of those vaccines is another story. And as I understand it, it's going to take some time before the yous and me's of the world are going to be able to be vaccinated and therefore more confident about things like travel and face-to-face meetings. So in between from now until that time when we feel a lot safer as a public, I think we have to work together. And I've never seen such strong coalitions and cooperation and collaboration take place in our industry as I do today. We're all in the same boat. We all want live programming to come back to life. We all want to see consumer confidence restored when it comes to travel and meetings. And so we're all driving in the same direction. And there's no sense in us doing that independently. We are doing it together. We all see various facets of it, but collectively, if we're successful, this will come back and we will be able to be on a growth path again. I often hear it asked, when will this be like it was? And I think it's going to take some time until it's like it was. It depends on what your benchmark is. If it's 2019, well, we're probably not going to get back to those levels until 23, maybe 24. And I don't mean to be a pessimist, but the idea is to get us back on a growth pattern, both associations, hospitality, any dimension that you bring to a meeting, venues, that's our goal right now. And as I said, working together. For associations, in order for attendees to say, yeah, that's a meeting I'm going to go to, I'm going to get on a plane and attend face-to-face or live, a lot of things have to fall into place. And You know, if we were working with a destination in order to put that together, we would need to create a story that is compelling enough that says it's safe to come, it's safe to be here, here's how the city is cooperating, the venues, all of the various parts and pieces of a city and the destination, in order to tell that story. And the association is a part of that in order for attendees to say yes, to come to the annual meeting or whatever meeting. It could be a board meeting. It all takes the same kind of confidence on the part of the attendees. So, you know, associations alone can't tell that story. We're very dependent on our partners to do that. And that's why this collaboration that I think we all see now is so important.
Yes, and I think a lot of us would agree that there is still a lot of unknown ahead of us. We don't have the crystal ball, but there's also still the confidence and the hope that our industry will recover and come back. It won't be the same, but we all will come out of it more resilient, more knowledgeable, better partners, more optimistic, and certainly thank you for sharing those sentiments with us. Do you have any maybe final words of wisdom, encouragement, or maybe advice to those organizations who might be just now looking at the bigger picture and trying to redefine themselves and trying to, for some, maybe survive?
And I think you're right on all counts. It's survival in some cases. It's, you know, what's new, what can we do differently? You know, my encouragement is that in this environment, we can take some risks. I think I mentioned earlier that perfection is really not a part of our picture right now. We can't be perfect. We have to do things differently. We are going to make mistakes, but we're going to make them with the right goal in mind, which is to serve our members and to achieve our missions. And that has to always be the North Star that we have in front of us. So I would encourage organizations of all sizes to, one, think about the collaboration that we could have that we haven't had before, work with others to achieve the same goals, as we're doing in the hospitality and travel industry, working with associations as well. We all have to extend a hand to each other and be very dependent on each other to come out of this together. So that's one. The other is to be creative and to be a little bit fearless. We're all going to have to make some tough decisions and have made tough decisions in order to get through this. Many organizations have had to reduce their staff members, which is never a good thing. It's not good to go through. I would say that's the role of leadership right now, is in order for the longer run for the organization to be healthy. And the last thing I would say is to plan. At the beginning of this crisis, ASAE had just launched a strategic planning project. And when COVID hit, I thought, oh my goodness, how are we going to juggle that, which is a really big project, and all the other things that we have to deal with. And I will say that it's been a saving grace to actually plan for a future that is influenced by this COVID environment, but not entirely dependent on it. Makes us look at where our priorities need to be, what we don't know, what our strengths are, where our gaps are, and to have a plan in place so that when we do emerge from this, that we have something to work towards. So I'm excited that we've done that. And for organizations that are just looking at the here and now and how we get out of this, I would encourage them to look 6 months, a year and a half from now and say, how should we look, and what are the lessons that we've learned during this terrible crisis are we going to learn from and take with us? And it's always going to be a part of our business model. Being virtual is one of those things, but being responsive, being nimble, being leaner, thinking differently, using digital assets differently, all of those things combine to create new business models and a new distribution of revenue sources. Associations, including ASAE, have been very dependent in revenue on live meetings. And now we've had to diversify and find other ways to create revenue for ourselves and to manage our expenses. Coming out of this crisis, we may do the same and then have the great benefit of having live meetings again. And I think as a result, we'll be a lot stronger.
Thank you, Susan. Well, ASAE has always been a great resource and the knowledge hub. So we would probably always encourage our audience to check back with you and use your educational resources to learn about the trends and the issues, to get guidance. And we really do appreciate you sharing your words of wisdom with us and words of encouragement. Thank you very much, Susan.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Well, I would like now to expand our view a little bit internationally and see if associations and our peers in the industry globally may be going through some of the similar challenges as well as transformation that we have talked about so far with our colleagues at PCMA and ASAE. And to give us a global perspective, we're going to turn to our colleagues in ICCA. So I have here Senthil with me. Welcome. Senthil, would you mind first introducing yourself and maybe telling us a little bit about you and the organization that you represent?
Absolutely, Larissa. My name is Senthil Gopinath. I'm the Chief Executive of International Congress and Conventions Association, which is known fondly as ICCA. We are a global association represented in over 100 countries, 1,100 members plus members. We represent different sectors, the venues, the meeting management sector, the destination marketing sector, the airlines, and of course, rest of the other meeting support, the audiovisuals, etc. It's a combination of all these segments are composed what is ICCA today. We are one of the oldest association. Of course, our main objective is to build a knowledge thought process, build the business platforms for our members, and most importantly, engage our members as a community. That's ICCA all about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Senthil. We hear a lot in North America that associations now are going through a lot of transformation. A lot of this has to do with their meetings, but overall, really with them looking at what their goals are at this time, coming out of pandemic and looking into the future, what their priorities are, how they stay relevant and provide value to their members. Are you seeing similar trends with international associations globally? Would you provide some insights for us into that?
Absolutely, Larissa. I would call it the value strategies have changed within associations because, as you know, associations have grown phenomenally in the last decade. Every segment, every discipline you talk about, there is association globally. ICCA deals with almost 13,000 association meetings a year, and we have association community part of ICCA as well. What I'm seeing more and more, it's very important for us to understand associations are looking at these value strategies going forward. They need to partner with our membership. So in the future, way of working with associations are more partnering, understanding the inner requirement of associations, and I do recommend the entire industry. It's more of a collaboration and partnership. In the past, it used to be a RFP and you're winning a bid and you're servicing your association in terms of events. In terms of governance, in terms of managing association, again, it's a requirement associations ask from our members to come forward. But going forward, even at post-pandemic, it's very important for us to understand on a long term, it'll be very much on a partnered role, and that's what our members need to work on. So we have been advocating as ICCA a lot.
Yes, we actually hear that a lot from other segments as well, that everybody is rethinking how we do business together. Our industry really stands very strongly on partnerships. We work in the industry, we make partners, friends. In crises like we're experiencing right now, we all learn from each other. I spoke earlier to our colleagues at the Hotel Lodging Association, as well as the venues. Everybody is thinking, how can we do better business together and stay strong together? So thank you for making that comment. I wanted to ask specifically about ICCA now. You are a membership organization. I have been a member for a long time. We all look forward to the event. So ICCA as a membership-driven organization, what are some of the changes you're experiencing that might be similar to what your member organizations are experiencing right now?
Yeah, true. I mean, when the pandemic began, what we took on a very strong approach as ICCA, what we said is very important that for us to communicate and collaborate with our members. We remodeled all our business activities within which we engage with our members. So be it from a digital format or be it from engaging at different, ICCA represents in different regions as well. So how do we engage and how do we really collaborate to build the best practices and knowledge for our members? So that was that was our key focus in the last 8 months or so. So we remodeled, we immediately reskilled all our staff so that the team understands not the traditional service you offer to our members. It's a new way of working with our members. So we immediately went on to that and remodeled, and it proved to be very successful. We didn't cancel any of the events or any of the activities in the last 8 months.
This is very interesting that you mentioned about reskilling your staff. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because we also hear from associations in different industries doing the same thing. You know, everybody had to very quickly pivot and move their events, let's say, to virtual platforms, and we all had to learn so much in such a short period of time. But this probably goes beyond just learning how to do virtual events. What does this mean, reskilling? How is it important now that we're coming out of the pandemic?
Right. ICCA being a global association, we need to showcase a leadership role. So that was very fundamental for us when we started from beginning of first quarter of this year. So what we did with the ICCA team, we immediately moved into changing and challenging the roles within ICCA. So we constructed different divisions, different roles within ICCA, and started combining their roles for them to learn how do they service the members. So if you're on a digital format, what is the skill you need so that your members see you as a case study? So we went into this global training, engaging leading sort of digital companies around, and we started engaging our staff on a front line with examples and case studies internally. So when we came to the ICCA events and ICCA activities with our members, they could really apply those examples and their thought processes.
Very interesting. Speaking of ICCA Congress, the 59th, is that correct, Congress took place earlier this month, and it was a hybrid event. And that was, we can say, the first time that you're doing this event on a hybrid platform. Is that the future, or is there an opportunity for all of us to come back together at one of the most anticipated events in the industry?
Right. It was a very ambitious plan when we launched the hybrid event. It seems to be one of the largest congresses we ever had in the history of ICCA. Having said that, we as ICCA are a strong advocate that face-to-face meeting has to return. So there is no question about it. And we wanted our members to meet each other. That's the best form of knowledge sharing and the growth of our industry, so that our businesses keeps alive and they can move forward, or they can reimagine their new model. But having said that, in the near future, I think hybrid is here to stay. And we as ICCA is very, very convinced that even the future ICCA Congress, not from a thought process of post-COVID situation, but primarily to allow more members to engage who are unable to travel, who have the budget constraint. We want them to engage. So yeah, definitely we'll continue the hybrid model.
Again, very interesting that it really resonates what you said with what we hear from our associations within different industries, whether it's in the medical field or information technology or financial insurance. Everybody who have gone through the first experiences of holding their events on virtual platforms realize that they're able to tap into much broader audiences through virtual. And they believe that this is the future to move forward. So it's really very interesting to see that ICCA experience in that was very, very similar.
And if I can add a little thought there, it's about more engagement or more members, but most importantly, the customized focus in each region can be achieved as well, so that you're building a platform which caters to Asia Pacific, to Latin America, to North America. You can cater to the needs, which are going to be very new in the future when we come to post-pandemic situation. So the hybrid model enables you to do that.
Absolutely, that makes or provides the opportunity to really have an even more broader global outlook and how associations grow globally by providing their products, their education for the most part, and curated and delivered in the regions, on the platforms, and in the languages that they will respond to, and in the format that the different regions will respond to very better. Thank you. So would you have any maybe final words of wisdom or encouragement to those associations who might be just at the beginning of looking at the big picture and looking for ways how to transform and come out and not just recover from the pandemic or from the crisis they found themselves in, but really thrive in the future?
Yeah, I think two other important points I mentioned. It's very fundamental to go on, communicate and collaborate. So the collaboration effort is very, very important. The other most important point is we need to reskill our own resources and our industries as well, our members as well, because that's the only way we are going to achieve our recovery much sooner than what we anticipate. So very important that, and at grassroots levels, this needs to be put on with our membership organization. That's what ICCA is doing. So we conduct enormous amount of workshops and trainings freely offered throughout the last 10 months or so to our members, primarily to reskill them and get them to think this is the future. You're not going to get back to the what was pre-COVID situation. but for the future. So I keep requesting all the associations and all members, keep reskilling your resources. That's very, very important.
Well, it's very nice and very uplifting to hear that everybody we've interviewing this week and for this particular session is having a very positive outlook on the future. And again, we stopped talking about just a recovery. We see moving forward is redesigning, reinventing, creating the better versions of ourselves and our organization. So thank you for sharing those sentiments with us as well. We really appreciate your time, your insights. Wish you best of luck, and we cannot wait to come back to ICCA Annual Congress soon.
Sure. Looking forward to seeing you there, Larissa. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Senthil. Sven, thank you very much for being here with us today. And we're going to talk about the changing face of the meetings industry overall, and from the perspective of one of the most important elements of the design of any face-to-face event, which is the venue specifically. But before we go into that, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization?
Yeah, of course. So, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. My name is Sven Bossu. I'm the CEO of AIPC. That's the Global Association of Event Venues. We group 180 venues across the world, and they are located in more than 60 countries, something like that. And so what we try to do is three things. On the one hand, we provide education. Secondly, we do research. And thirdly, what we try and do is define quality standards for venues to apply.
Understood. So Sven, if I understand correctly, you took the position of CEO of such a large global organization at the end of May or early June this year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So you know where I'm going with this question. I have to ask you, really, this time is going in the history of our industry as one of the most challenging times. You know, we were already dealing with COVID, and we had to already deal with the consequences of our industry being shut down. So for anyone taking such an important role, I have to ask you, was that just an unfortunate coincidence, or was it a bold strategic move on your part or your association part?
So I would love to say that it's a bold strategic move, but no, not really. We started discussing around me taking up this role last year already. At that moment, COVID was still far, far away. This being said, I am, I think, very fortunate to be in this role right now because it allows me, together with the community, to profoundly rethink what we need to do and how can we make our industry thrive again. And it's actually a very exciting time to do this. Though, yeah, it has some doubts, as you know more than anybody else, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about your members then. They are large venues around the world, obviously. And what I'm hearing from our association customers, for the most part, that really we're not looking at the concept of space the same way any longer, because we are embracing, as an industry, we're embracing technology. And I hear from my association customers saying that the virtual has become the new space, the new venue. So how are your members coping with that paradigm shift, and how you as an organization helping them navigate that?
Yeah. So two things there. I think indeed what we've seen, technology has done tremendous things over the last year, right? It kept the economy afloat. It's the Teams and the Zooms, it's everything. It allows us to connect and to continue to work. However, what it does not do in any way is create true interaction, which allows for true collaboration, true innovation, and true trade. For that, people still need to physically see each other. So I would like to agree with the association to a certain level. Indeed, there is digital, and digital can be used for a certain purpose. And then the face-to-face meetings are used for a different purpose. Just to give two examples, are we still going to have a general assembly where we bring people together from across the world, which will take 4 hours, including a 90-minute lunch break? No, that's not going to happen anymore. Obviously not. That's going to be digital. If we're talking about bringing together great medical brains into one space to discuss the next step into radiotherapy, for example, yes, we will need to have that work physically. So I think what associations will need to do and think through very carefully is what are the objectives of the meetings they want to have. If it's about dissemination of knowledge, I think digital can play a critical and a true role there, because digital allows to reach people which otherwise you would not be able to reach. However, if it's really about innovation, it's about working together, then you need to bring people physically together, and event venues are the ideal platform to do so for two reasons. One, they offer the space and safety and security protocols to do this in a safe and secure way. But on top of that, now they have a digital offering. And so you can actually flip between this part of my event I want to do face-to-face, this part of my event I want to do digitally. And event venues can cater for that these days. So that's perfectly fine.
That's very interesting, because the general sentiment in the industry across all segments is that the virtual events and hybrid events are here to stay, but they will not replace the face-to-face for that specific reason that you're mentioning right now. Absolutely. Thank you. You know, we talk about, or maybe early on, we talked about recovery of the industry, but I think the now our thinking has shifted from maybe talking not so much about the recovery, but reinvention, redesigning, like how do we find ourselves in the new reality as individuals, as professionals, and also as organizations. So what are some of the things that you had to do as a membership-based organization to stay relevant, to continue providing the value to your members across the globe?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do from our side is really understand the issues our members are facing, and trying to provide them with tools that help them to define a roadmap. We don't provide solutions. We don't have crystal balls saying this is a direction you need to look in. What we can do, though, is provide a framework which allows any venue to ask itself the right questions. Do I have a diverse audience which I serve? Do I have a non-diverse audience which I serve? Do I have a digital offering? Don't I have a digital offering? Am I financially very dependent on one or two customers? Or do I have a broad base of customers which I can relate on? And you go through, we have a question list of about 14 questions, and you go through those questions and you look yourself really hard in the eyes and say, okay, how does this really like? Yeah? Do I depend for 60% of our revenue of 2 events? Well, then you have a problem. And then you need to start thinking. And that's fine, because what you do have in our industry, and it's something which is so underestimated, is we have smart, creative people, right? And they die for the problems to come at them and to look at them and to find solutions for them. And sometimes those solutions will be completely out of the box. Right? We are now looking at venues who are renting out space as TV studios, simply because the space is there. The TV studios are in need of space because there's a massive demand for TV shows. So there is a win-win situation there. Of course, it's not our core business, but it's business. And we need to think, okay, we have that space, we have those facilities, which are the audiences which are in need for that. Another case was the universities. Universities are in massive need of space for their students. Guess who has space? It's event venues, right? So it's that type of thinking we need to do. It's around, okay, we have facilities. Who are the unserved audiences? How can we do a service offer for them?
Interesting. So what you're saying is that we're really looking for new ways of doing business, completely redefining our models, right? It is true for the association, it's true for your members. So would you say that was the really positive kind of takeaway or impact of a very difficult, what seems like a very difficult situation? I'm trying to look at things in a positive way.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we're all trying to do. I had the discussion with my children today, right? I said, would you remember 2020? And they said, well, why would we remember 2020, right? We were not able to go to school. We weren't able to hang out with our friends, and we couldn't go to our grandparents. Fine. But I think for the event business, it's a very different story. For the event business, it is the year where we had the opportunity to completely reinvent ourselves, to re-question our purpose, and to come with something which is a stronger solution and a more sustainable solution, right? Coming back to my example earlier of the General Assembly bringing in 100 people from across the world, that's not sustainable, guys. This is not 2020 anymore. That needs to be something different. However, bringing together people in a meaningful way with a clear purpose that is never going to go away. And the moment we can, we will, definitely.
So your organization, with you on board early on, has gone through that really challenging exercise of redefining yourselves, and you're constantly doing that. Do you have any advice for organizations who might be just now looking at that bigger picture, thinking that, you know, in order to survive and thrive in this new normal, they had to go through some changes? What would be your best advice for them?
I think, and it's a very positive thing, the future is something you create yourself, right? So don't think the government is going to solve my problem. Don't think vaccine is going to bring everything back as it was before. That's not going to happen. But the future is there for you to create. It's for you to ask the right questions, to say, this I can do, this I can do, this I want to do, and then you dive in, and then the future is yours. I think that's something we all need to embrace, is being very agile, being very nimble, but always keep in mind, the future is ours to create.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Sven. We appreciate your insights and very wise and encouraging words moving forward.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Let's now talk about one more really important component of every trip, whether it's a leisure trip or a business trip, or if you're planning a trip to attend a conference. We'll talk about the hotel industry. And to help us have a look at hotels and the state of the industry and how it's moving forward, we're going to check in with American Hotel Lodging Association, AHLA. Chip, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization?
Well, first, it's great to be with you. My name is Chip Rogers. I'm president and CEO of the American Hotel and Lodging Association. And the best way to describe us is we represent the entire Hotel and Lodging Association in the US. And that goes from the largest brands that, of course, are global brands. We all know Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, IHG, Wyndham, Choice, basically everybody, all the way down to the individual property owner. And that property owner could own a large resort, or they could own a very small limited service hotel. So anybody in between those two is part of our organization. And then also the vendors who supply goods and services to our organization, or to our industry as well, part of AHLA.
Fantastic. Chip, just to give our audience a perspective on how large the industry is, what does it look like in numbers? Can you share with us?
Well, I can tell you what it looked like as we began 2020. Those numbers, of course, have dwindled because of the pandemic, but we started this year with about 56,000 hotels across the US. Strangely enough, or I should say neatly enough, the average room count is about 100 rooms per hotel on average. So you're looking at about 56 or 560,000 rooms across the US, or I should say 5,600,000. But that, of course, has dwindled through this year as a number of hotels, unfortunately, could not make it from the pandemic. But about 56,000 hotels was the starting point for the US.
So this is incredible. And if I'm correct, I also read that about every one in 25 Americans are employed by hospitality industry. Is that correct?
That is true. Whether they work directly for a hotel or for a company that whose primary business is to service hotels, whether through goods or services. Yeah, about 1 out of every 25 as we began 2020.
Thank you. Obviously, a very large industry has been impacted and hit hard by the pandemic. As a membership-driven organization, when the crisis hit and the industry went into the lockdown, have you had to pause for a second and then maybe reconsider what your priorities at the moment are, how to stay relevant, how to help your members? Did you have to pivot and reconsider how AHLA functions at the moment?
You know, the good news on that front was that the two major areas that we work in are advocacy, primarily at AHLA, and through our foundation, workforce development. And so the only pivot we really had to do was to refocus what we were doing in those two areas. So for example, in advocacy, at any given time, we're usually working on 5 to 7 major federal issues that impact our industry, and probably 5 to 7 state and local issues that impact our industry. Once COVID hit in late February and as we regrouped and started in March, it was COVID all the time, whether it be state and local advocacy or federal advocacy, nothing but COVID since that point in time. On the workforce development side, it was interesting. Of course, we stopped having in-person workshops, but we quickly pivoted to 100% digital. And we're glad to say, or I should say proud to say in many ways, that during this entire pandemic, we've been able to give away more than $3.5 million worth of free certifications and free education to people that are in our industry who either got laid off, were on furlough, or in some way had their hours cut. So we've been able to continue to do the major things that we do as an association. We just had to do them in a little more focused way.
I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about the results of the recent national survey that AHLA conducted, I believe. And even though the numbers might sound a little bit still dark right now, but is there maybe coming out of this, is there a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, for the travelers? And speak about maybe leisure as well as business travel, if you can.
Any business can usually succeed if they know what's ahead of them, right? You can plan for the future if you know what that future looks like. I think that's been the big struggle for everybody since February, at least in the US, and that is not knowing when is this going to end, not knowing when the next spike may come, not knowing if your part of the country is going to be hit while other parts of the country are not getting hit. And so that has been the real big challenge for everybody. And of course, planning a business in and around unknown facts is very different and difficult. But planning travel is just as challenging. And so what we have seen in the US, of course, is the drive-to markets where there are outdoor activities actually holding up quite well. So if you have a hotel in and around a beach in a warm weather area right now, or during the summer, someplace where there are a lot of outdoor activities and hiking and boating and things like that, you probably did okay. What has been destroyed, of course, is the urban city centers. Anything that has been focused on large conventions and conferences, those areas have just been, again, destroyed by this pandemic. And there's a lot of questions out there as to how those areas are going to survive. So as we look ahead to 2021, I think most people in the industry, at least in the US, say to ourselves, the first quarter is going to be bleak. It's going to be very bleak. In fact, you could argue that between December and March are going to be the toughest times overall for the industry. After that, once you get into the spring travel season, I think you're going to begin to see the leisure travel return. Leisure travel was pretty good actually this summer. So I think you'll see it again, especially in a world where vaccines exist, therapies are improved, testing is quicker, faster, cheaper, more reliable. So I think you'll see that. As far as business travel is concerned, we're really looking at the middle of next year, probably late second, early third quarter for business travel really to begin. And I'd characterize that as white collar business travel. You already have some traditional non-white collar business travel happening right now, trucking and things like that. And then finally, for large conferences and conventions, most of those are getting pushed back really to the fall of 2021. There will be some conferences and conventions in the summer, but if you're looking for anything close to what you saw in 2019, that's not going to emerge for quite some time, and it will really begin in the fall of 2021.
Thank you, Chip. Despite how challenging the situation might be right now, I think the only way out of this is the way forward. And I think it's very important for us to be prepared as an industry for the return of travel. So what is it at hotels? Would you mind talking a little bit about the Safe to Stay initiative, I believe it's called? I know that venues are redesigning themselves, reconsidering how they use spaces, making sure that it is safe and it's within the regulations. What does it look like within hotels?
So it's interesting, really all the way back at the beginning of this, probably late March, maybe early April, we came together as an industry and as the leaders of our industry here in the US and said, look, we're going to have some standards that can be applied across the board to every hotel so that consumers and hotel employees feel safe. They feel that they're in a clean environment, whether it be a work environment or a leisure environment. And so we were able to do that. We brought together every major brand really across the globe. We were able to bring most of the major ownership groups, the management groups together, pretty much all the large players in the hotel industry and say, is there a baseline of cleaning and safety standards that we can apply? What was created out of that was Safe Stay, and it was adopted all across the industry here in the US, and we're thankful for that. we've been able to use those safe stay standards and evolve those safe stay standards from the initial scientific understanding we had of the virus, which back in March and April was clean, 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 every surface that you can see. And now that has really moved towards how are we protecting people that are in public spaces through the wearing of face coverings and the like. How are we making sure that we have proper spacing anywhere where people could potentially gather? How are we using technology to make sure that people aren't gathered in those places that they normally are just because they're required to, like checking in and checking out of a hotel? And so using those standards and having those evolve over time has really been critical for our industry. The last product that we put out related to safe stay was how to have safe meetings and events. We have checklists that are available for every hotel. So if you go to our website under Safe Stay, you can find those checklists and use those to make sure that you're doing all the right things. And then finally, we got the medical experts, really from the very beginning, the medical experts, to look at what we're doing, make sure that what we're doing was right. I believe we're the first industry to have the CDC here in the United States, the Centers for Disease Control, look at our guidelines, review our guidelines, and make recommendations on changes. And we were able to do that in a way that created the confidence that we wanted from the very beginning for both the hotel guest and the hotel employees.
Chip, I asked this question a lot of our participants. How do you see the partnerships maybe evolving among suppliers and our customers, whether associations or corporations? How do, it's, the way we do business with each other is transforming. Do you see any positives, any changes? Can you share with us?
Well, boy, there's a lot here that has changed that I think will be beneficial moving forward. First and foremost, for years, mainly as an advocacy organization, we try to communicate that message of the impact down to the local community level that hotels have on any given area, whether it's a small city or a state or an entire country. A lot of that, of course, just a lot of numbers, studies that we can bring people, and they're all accurate. But now that we've had a pandemic, and now that these local governments have seen what happens when you don't have tourism, when you don't have people staying in hotels and restaurants and museums and sporting events and live music events, now they really understand what this fiscal impact is like. So I think making our case moving forward to government officials is going to be easier. The second part of that is we've certainly learned as different parts of a global hospitality and tourism industry that we've got to work together in ways that we probably never conceived before. When times are good, people typically go on their own way. They want to show their own worth and value, and they do their own thing because they have the resources to do so. When times are challenging, like we've seen over the last 9 months, people recognize, hey, we got to work together to be more effective in a more cost-effective manner as well. And so when you look at travel and tourism, back before the pandemic, all we worried about was what's happening with hotels. Now it's in our greatest concern to make sure that people are safe and comfortable getting into an airplane, getting into an Uber or Lyft, making sure that they have the financial wherewithal to take a vacation, to take that leisure trip that we want them so desperately to do. And so all of these things really play together, from the safety, the cleanliness, the promotion, the public policy, and it takes all of us to make sure that that is working in a manner that everyone is benefiting. If the airlines are hurting, the hotels aren't going to be doing well. And if the hotels aren't doing well, your local restaurants aren't going to do well. So everyone has to work together, and we certainly know that more now than we ever have before.
Absolutely. I think one of the major positive outcomes has been us realizing how important our industry is, how we can work closer together and be better partners for each other. The acceleration of our transformation and learning that has happened because of that is another positive. Just to conclude our conversation, are there any final words of wisdom or maybe encouragement from you? We still have a lot of the unknown ahead of us. There seems to be more confidence about coming out of the crisis. What are some of the final words you can share that might be more uplifting for us today?
So 3 things. First and foremost, at least here in the US, this Operation Warp Speed that brought to market a couple of vaccines already, or I should say they're almost at market. They've been proven effective. And the distribution system that's been set up is something like we've never seen before. And we shouldn't dismiss that. In the past, if we would have had a virus like this that required a vaccine, you would be talking years and years for that to be produced. And now we've done it in just a few months. That is absolutely amazing and should give us a lot of confidence moving forward that we can handle things. The second part is that in any industry, when times are tough, and these have been the toughest ever, it forces you to prioritize what matters most on your own staff, what matters most in your operations, what matters most to your guests. And going through that process to make sure that you are doing things in the most efficient way possible is going to certainly help us a lot when we come out of this. And then, of course, the final thing is that, you know, there's been so much talk about this changing people forever. The reality is that human nature is human nature, and a pandemic's not going to change that. We need each other. Humans want to be with each other. That is not going to change. This global idea that travel makes the world a better and closer place is absolutely true today, just like it was in January this year, and certainly like it will be in 12 months from now. And so we will go back to traveling because it's what humans want to do and what humans need to do and what we should do. And so that's a bright outlook for our industry, because I know we're going to bounce back.
Well, thank you very much for ending on such a positive note. We do appreciate your time and your insights, and we really are all looking forward to coming out of this and going back to our favorite destinations, visiting our favorite hotels and resorts, and being all together on those trips. Thank you very much. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, in the session today, we are focusing a little bit on the business event segment. And we so far have actually checked in with association colleagues in our industry. We talked a lot about how associations are recovering, how they had to pivot to redefine their roles and redefine their priorities moving forward. We also checked with our supply partners. We spoke to the venues, we spoke to the hotels, and we learned from them about how they are preparing for the industry to come back and to allow us to safely return and travel and do our meetings. And now I think I'd like us to focus on an industry or a segment of our industry that is hiding behind the I, the letter I in the MICE term that we still use sometimes when we refer to business events. So we will talk about the incentive segment. And as many of you may know, that it is one of the fastest growing, or used to be before COVID. We'll talk about that a little bit. It's a $75 billion industry. It's one of the segments that is most lucrative. It's most coveted by many of our destinations and properties, hotels that profile for that segment. And who better to help us look at incentive segment, corporate and incentive segment than SITE, Society for Travel Excellence.
Thank you very much, Larissa. So my name is Pádraic Gilligan, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer at SITE, which is the Society for Incentive Travel Excellence. It's an association that's just coming up very shortly to 50 years. It was started in 1973 and has grown from being originally a North American association into a global association. When we compare ourselves with the other industry associations and MICE, we like to think that we have the biggest global footprint. We're present in about 90 countries around the world, and we have over 30 very, very active chapters. So our thing is the I in MICE. That's who we are. SITE is the I in MICE. We're all about incentive travel. And obviously it's as you've already said, it's a hugely lucrative part of the MICE proposition, and destinations do indeed covet the incentive travel market and try to position themselves in order to win incentive travel business.
I asked this question all of our participants earlier, and I would like to ask you this as well as an association executive. When pandemic hit and the industry came to a standstill, have you had to take a pause and maybe reconsider some of the value that you bring to your members, some of your priorities, and what do they look like now and moving into the future versus what they were like before pandemic?
It's actually, it's a great question. And I think some of what happened intuitively or instinctively. But looking back, I think we can understand that we essentially kind of switched our gaze. Our gaze up until, say, the end of February had been very much outward. Incentive travel was very, very much at the forefront in terms of, hitting the headlines. It was the fastest growing, it was the highest spending, and so on. And we had come from a very confident sort of period of growth as kind of an element in the industry at large. And I think what we started to do very instinctively in around about March of last year is we started to kind of dial down a little bit on those outward facing messages and focus instead on our community, on our members. We tried to get as close as we possibly could to our membership. It was very much metaphorically an arm around the shoulder, because that's how people were feeling at the time. We didn't have answers. Nobody had answers. And in a way, that's still the case. We still are in that kind of stage of unknowing, perhaps with a little bit more kind of potential insight due to good news recently about the potential of a vaccine and so on. But our priority has been really to focus on our members, to help them as they navigate the challenges and difficulties of being furloughed or laid off, or having reduced hours or reduced salaries and so on. So that has been our outlook. And the change really has been from that kind of external, confident, outward looking association to an association that cares, that's concerned, and that's really kind of bound up in the lives and careers of its members.
Thank you. Pádraic, you mentioned that, we still have a lot of uncertainty and unknown that we're dealing with. And obviously the road to recovery might be still long for our industry altogether. But do you see any signs of recovery right now? Do you have any predictions of when incentive travel might return? You mentioned vaccine. Are there any other determining factors that are important that will help us all come back to safe travel?
Yeah, thanks, Larissa, for that question. I'll answer the question, I think, perhaps with the filter of a recent global research that our foundation, the SITE Foundation, was involved with, along with two other industry associations, Finance and Insurance Conference Professionals and the Incentive Research Foundation. And we've been partnering with Oxford Economics on a kind of a global index for incentive travel for quite some time. And this year, obviously, we had to reposition the entire kind of direction of the research in order to reflect the reality of COVID. We should have actually undertaken this research back in May, but we purposely decided to hold off until later in the year in order to get a kind of a better picture of how the incentive travel community globally was feeling about sort of the potential for recovery. So what we're seeing very clearly in the research is that on aggregate, taking all of the responses together, we had just under 3,000 responses. So taking all of those together, most incentive travel professionals are predicting recovery by 2023. Most of them are recording drops of up to 75% in business levels in 2020. That improves in 2021 already, improves again in 22. But it's not until 2023 that we start kind of pushing beyond the 100% that was our baseline based on 2019 figures. The interesting kind of thing there, Larissa, is that the regional picture is actually a little bit different from the aggregate picture. So if we look individually at the regions, what we see is a very, very bullish North America, US in particular, that sees recovery already in 2022 and being at 116% of the 2019 figure by 2023. In Europe, that's below the 100% in 2023. And in other regions, similarly kind of below that target. So yeah, recovery is definitely on everybody's radar. It's just not coming at the same rate in all of the different regions of the world. And I think there's a lot of the politics of coronavirus, I think, involved in how we see recovery too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pádraic. I think we all agree that when we go back to travel, it might start with more on the regional level. There's a lot of talk about that before the international trips even resume. And definitely statistics show that different regions recover at different pace. I'm interested to know a little bit about how really the incentive segment is changing, and maybe just not necessarily because of COVID, but we heard about some trends already evolving pre-COVID in terms of the purpose of incentive travel, or what the buyers, or I guess the users of incentive trips, were looking for in terms of experiences. Can you share some of those? I don't know, maybe it's social responsibility or sustainability trends have been affecting this, or maybe something else.
Sure. The main kind of underlining trend that we've been tracking in incentive travel over the last couple of years has been a kind of a switch in terms of the overall objective of incentive travel, away from a hard dollar return to a kind of a soft power return. And if I could illustrate that, incentive travel obviously exists within corporations as an organizational tool to encourage performance levels. The incentive travel experience is the reward that you receive for having reached those levels. And the purpose of it in many respects is that, you know, you're motivated by the desire to get the trip, so therefore you perform better, you generate more bottom line. So that has always been the kind of the core focus for incentive travel, that it's about generating greater profitability in organizations. And it's been proven to work extremely well in that way, and particularly well in certain sectors like financial and insurance, automotive, IT and pharma and so on. So in a way, that has always been the purpose. But what we've been noticing over the last number of years, when we ask buyers, what are the objectives that you're trying to achieve in your programs? They continue to say that it's about return on investment. But more and more, they call out things like relationship building, the fostering of corporate culture, the breaking down of hierarchies, the connection between corporate officers and qualifiers. So it's all about kind of building that soft power in an organization. And that can take place when you go offsite, when you travel to a different place, and when you take those people and put them together in a location that's unfamiliar to them all. It allows for that kind of bonding to take place. So we've seen that kind of over the last number of years. And I was going to say strangely, but it's not strangely at all. It's actually unsurprisingly, in the context of COVID, what we're seeing is a further focus on that. For the first time in the last number of years, return on investment is not called out as the number one objective for incentive travel. All of the soft power elements are coming ahead of that. In fact, the first three objectives that are called out are all soft power. It's only in fourth position that return on investment is actually coming into play. So that's a big change. And that is not caused by COVID, but it's emphasized even further by COVID.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the significance, the importance of our industry. We talk about this with Susan Robertson at ASAE, and we talk with Association of Hotel Lodging Association as well. The impact that associations in our industry have on global communities overall, and the advocacy efforts and the power of associations as a voice of our industry. What are some of the initiatives that SAID has undertaken recently? Can you share with us?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. I think, you know, associations are probably kind of, at this point, more in focus than ever, particularly industry associations where, and particularly within the MICE sector, where an individual might have a choice to belong to PCMA or MPI or SITE. And in good years, they'll belong to all of them, because I think belonging is, it's part of who we are as a business events industry. We feel a need, perhaps more than any other area of human endeavor, to connect with other people and to build those relationships. And I think the industry associations that we have, they serve that need for us in a really, really tangible way. They connect us to communities of interest. They connect us to like-minded individuals. In particular, I think the interesting thing, for SITE has been defining like the greater audience that we have. And what we've been doing over the last couple of years is looking in detail at how we communicate with the first element of that audience, which is our members. The second element of that audience is the industry at large. And then beyond that, there are two other crucial audiences for us, for SITE. One is the business community, because we're about incentive travel, but we also have to make the case for incentive travel. We also have to prove the benefit of incentive travel to an organization. And that in turn, obviously benefits our members and benefits the industry at large. And then the last piece of the jigsaw for us is society as a whole. SITE is about incentive travel, but a crucial element in that is the word travel. And we believe that travel is transformative. We believe that travel has an impact on society at large that makes a difference. We frequently quote Mark Twain's wonderful phrase about travel is the enemy of bigotry, because that's what travel does. It frees people, it makes us more tolerant, it gives us more understanding of other cultures and so on. So I think what we're seeing in SITE now is we're seeing a greater purpose to what we do as an association. Beyond what we do for our members and for the industry, we're seeing kind of two further levels of responsibility that we have. One to the business world at large, and then that final one to society, because we need to keep that message out there that travel is transformative.
What a wonderful note to end our session on, because our whole summit today is about travel, about the role of travel in transforming the societies and bringing us together and making a positive impact on the world. So thank you, Pádraic, for sharing those sentiments with us. Just maybe some final words of wisdom or optimism or faith in the strength and resilience of our industry that you would like to share with our audience today.
Yeah, I think, at the beginning, we wondered, was this another example of our industry being hit by some cataclysmic event like 9/11 or like world recession or whatever? And, we weathered those storms extremely well. And I think we proved our resilience. I think what we're seeing now is that this is a totally different thing. This is going on far longer than any of us thought possible. So I think my words of encouragement would be to hang in there. Like, this too shall pass. It's going on longer than any of us is comfortable with, but I'm really, really encouraged by the opportunities that SITE members are finding to do things in different ways. I'm really encouraged by the reset that is happening, that's causing us to think again about travel, that's causing us to weigh up the pros and the cons, when it's right to travel and when it's not right to travel, because travel ultimately is an overhead on the ecology and on the environment in which we live, and we need to take that into account. And we were certainly getting to a point in our industry where, that whole flight shaming thing was going to be a big problem for us. But I think this reset allows us to do things in a more moderated way, in a more balanced way, but in a way I think that really brings out the true value and purpose of what travel is all about.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Pádraic, for being with us here today, for the words of wisdom and encouragement and the hope that comes from you. I do agree, and all of our participants today agree that there is light at the end of the tunnel. We will come out of it. We've done it time and again, and we can only do it together and stay strong. So let's just hang in there a little bit longer. Thank you very much.